From the Chicago Sun-Times newsroom, I'm Natasha Korecki, and this is Off Message, our weekly political talk show. Joining me this week is Mary Mitchell, one of our Sun-Times columnists, Bill Zwecker, another Sun-Times columnist, as well as our Springfield bureau chief, Dave McKinney. This week we've had some explosive allegations in the gubernatorial race.
It's quite unfortunate that Mr. Rutherford entered my client's bedroom and grabbed his genital area.
Dave, why don't we start off with you? How strong do you think this case is?
Well, I think that the crux of it, the allegation that there was an overnight stay at Dan Rutherford's house in which Rutherford allegedly grabbed the genitals of this underling, that part to me seems kind of weak because, there are no witnesses, no one to corroborate that story. There are other allegations contained within the complaint that do have a little bit of corroboration. But the timing of this being filed so close to the primary, I think, naturally leads to questions about, what the motivations are here, and none of us are going to know how this turns out before the primary.
What does this do to Dan Rutherford's campaign right now?
I think it puts it in a lot of trouble. First of all, Rutherford is saying that he is not gay. He's come out and said, I'm not gay. And then you have a sexual harassment suit filed by a man with all these salacious details. Regardless of how it turns out, for the time being, the voters are not going to be left with, well, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. There's nothing wrong with that, except he is running in the Republican Party. And also, if that's true and he is gay, he looks like a chicken. He looks like a dishonest person who is running under false pretenses.
How do you think that he's been handling this?
Well, at first he came right out ahead of time before this thing was filed saying that something's going to be coming. But my feeling is that if some of this is proven to be true, no matter how much or how little, this is going to be tough for him, especially in the Republican primary. You have to remember he's from Pontiac, he's from downstate. His base is even probably more conservative than the Republican voters that would be in Lake County or in this part of the state. I agree with Mary. I think this is going to be a big challenge for him.
How does he recover from here? I mean, there was a recent poll, WGN, Chicago Tribune poll this week. Rutherford wasn't even in the top two, and this lawsuit hadn't been filed yet. Rauner has a sizable lead. Can he recover at this point?
If things hold the way they are, I think this is a fatal blow for Rutherford, and rightly or wrongly. I mean, it personally is bothersome to me that these allegations are occurring right before a primary. There's no way to adjudicate them to tell who's right and who's wrong. If this thing just sort of fades into the darkness sometime this summer, we're all going to be left sort of scratching our heads like, this guy was taken down to what end? But I do think that he's going to have a very hard time recovering. You have to remember in November there was polling done by public policy polling that showed Rutherford as the only Republican candidate who would beat Quinn in a one-on-one matchup. So this has been a very, very difficult few weeks for Dan Rutherford.
Of course, that poll happened before this onslaught of Rauner campaign commercials, which I think was reflected in this most recent poll.
Rauner has done a great job flooding the airwaves with his message. He's constant, he's hitting it over and over and over, so his name is just out there. That's kind of hard. I never thought Rutherford really was a contender in the first place.
No, and I know, talking to a lot of people that I know that are major players in the Republican Party, they've all said all along that the only person that they feel could beat Governor Quinn is Rauner for the the money, the outsider aspect of his candidacy, and the way he's run these commercials. As Mary points out, they've been very effective.
Well, as long as we're on you, we're gonna switch topics here. Christie, the two of us were fortunate enough to be able to see that earlier this week. He was in Chicago, and he was asked some difficult questions.
Does the GW Bridge situation impact your ability to execute on those priorities for the state?
I'm shocked you brought that up.
You wrote a who's who, so of who attended.
Yeah, this, of course, what we attended was the Economic Club of Chicago luncheon. They packed that ballroom at the Sheraton. CEOs and ex-CEOs of a lot of major corporations. You had both Andy McKenna, former chairman of McDonald's Corporation, and his son, who was a former head of the Republican Party. You had Bill Daley was there, Bill Smithberg, a lot of major people who were major players on the city's corporate scene, and a lot of investment establishment people.
Any surprises?
From the reaction, no, I think it was all very positive. I think what people were talking about mostly is comparing him to the other possible Republican candidates for president in 2016. And when you look at people like Cruz and Marco Rubio and so forth that are far to the right, they feel the only person that could have a chance would be a moderate Republican. And in many ways, Christie fills the bill. Plus, he was very charming, there was a lot of humor, and he also talked a lot about economic things and education. So, I mean, there were some good things that he covered.
And what's so interesting to me is here's a guy with a bridge scandal hanging over his head, and he comes to Chicago, where we have thrown politician after politician into prison for doing corrupt things, and he's treated like a superstar. I mean, that says to me, that's the problem. We really don't look at the person's accountability. We just kind of look at the personality. We kind of get swept up into the charisma and the charm.
But there's a lot of conservatives who argue that Christie is getting hit way too hard by the media, that he has taken some steps to actually fire people who proved to be
what else could he do?
Crossing the line, and that he has said that he's not involved. And then they of course relate it back to Barack Obama, and they say, well, no one got fired in the IRS scandal, and at least he's taken action.
But the bottom line is, by the time we unravel all of this, there'll be 3 or 4 years down the road before we find out what really happened. In the meantime, there is this heavy weight over this man's head. It's a cloud. Even common sense would tell you something happened. We'd have to be very naive as voters to think, here's the man with all that power that didn't know what was going on to that degree in his own office. That'd be scary enough. I mean, that's worse than, the fact that he did it, or people think he did it.
Well, with that, I don't want to end before we go over the quotes of the week, one of our favorite little features. Dave, why don't we start off with you? What do you got for us?
Well, I owe this one to my friend and colleague here in Springfield, Bernie Schoenberg, who's a columnist for the State Journal-Register. He ran into Dan Rutherford at an event here in Springfield and asked him about the impact of the sexual harassment allegations against him. And this is what Rutherford said. It's actually turning out to be very positive for us. Okay, I want to see how this is positive for you.
Wow.
What do you got, Bill?
Well, as we sit here with the sun shining behind us, it's sort of funny to be talking about this, but one of the things that Chris Christie did say that was not really political but was kind of funny was he said the one thing that all politicians, Republicans or Democrats, hate is the weather, because we can't control it, but we're always responsible for the aftermath. And I thought that was pretty funny, and it's very true.
I agree with that, and that leads me to my quote. I was listening to WBBM, and they were talking to people in Atlanta who were, running around trying to get ready for that big storm. And they knew it was coming, and they had just descended upon the grocery stores. Okay, so they interviewed this guy, and he was complaining. They don't have any water, they don't have any bread, they don't have any milk, they don't even have any Gatorade. And I thought, Gatorade? That's what you have to have if you meet a storm.
Everybody handles emergencies in their own way.
Yes, indeed.
And mine is also Chris Christie when he announced to all the Republicans in the room, have faith, baby. And that was in response to, can a Republican ever take the governor's mansion again in Illinois? With that, thank you very much to our panel, and thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week on Off Message.